Welcome back to this series on David Ricardo's theory of value. In this episode, we're going to discuss the core of Ricardo's labor-embodied theory of value. Ricardo's point of departure from Smith is in delineating between two theories of value, which Smith often conflated, the labor-embodied and labor-commanded theories. Smith saw these two as one and the same. Ricardo is careful to point out that this is not the case. Labor embodied, to quote Ricardo, is under many circumstances an invariable standard, indicating correctly the variations in other things, while labor commanded is subject to as many fluctuations as the commodities compared with it. The labor embodied theory claims that the natural prices of commodities will be proportional to the quantities of labor expended in their production. The labor commanded theory holds that the natural prices of commodities will be proportional to the amount of labor they command in the market. Labor embodied is measured in terms of a quantity of labor, while labor commanded is measured in terms of the wage. Ricardo objects to the latter theory on the grounds that the wage is not invariant. It may vary with the price of wage goods which constitute it. A quantity of labor, on the other hand, does not vary with the natural price of wage goods. For example, suppose that a labor-saving technical innovation in the price of wage goods causes the natural price of labor to fall. In such a case, the ratio of the natural price of labor to the natural price of non-wage goods, say yachts to take an extreme example, would decrease. The typical wage would be able to buy fewer non-wage goods. In the same situation, the ratio of the price of labor to the price of non-wage goods would still be proportional to the amounts of labor embodied in their production. The labor-embodied theory would hold, while the labor-commanded theory falls aside. It's for this reason that Ricardo concludes that, quote, it is the comparative quantity of commodities which labor will produce that determines their present or past relative value, and not the comparative quantities of commodities which are given the laborer in exchange for his labor. One peculiarity about Smith's version of the labor-embodied theory is that he didn't extend it into class society. In Smith's view, once class relationships emerge and distributive shares begin to be distributed between capitalists, landlords, and laborers, a different theory of relative prices must take hold. In his case, he puts forth the adding up theory. The adding up theory is at odds with the labor-embodied theory, namely in that it considers different rates of profit yielded on the sale of different commodities as causing differences in their long-run relative prices. Ricardo makes his case against the adding up theory in favor of a labor-embodied theory by arguing that different profit rates cannot sustain differences in natural prices. He does so in two parts. First, he highlights the tautology inherent in the adding up theory, and then secondly, he introduces the notion of profit rate equalization. We'll address each of these in turn. Ricardo invokes the circularity problem of the adding up theory, already apparent in Smith's discussion of rents. Any individual sector's attempts to increase its rate of profit above the rate typical of all sectors at that given moment will be thwarted by increases in the costs of its own inputs. Take the example of a two-sector economy, in which each sector's outputs are the inputs for the other, at least to some degree. Any attempt of one sector to charge more for the sake of increased profitability will cause a spike in the costs of the other sector, which will have no choice but to increase the price of its own outputs until profit rates in both sectors return to their previous level. In addition to pointing out the circularity problem of the adding up theory, Ricardo points to another force that prevents excess profits in any one sector from causing sustained increases in the price of a commodity. That is, the equalization of profit rates. Capital flows from less profitable to more profitable sectors will cause profit rates across all sectors to equalize around a general rate. The mobility of capital equalizes profit rates between sectors in the same way that the mobility of laborers equalizes returns to labor. For this reason, prices which are greater or lesser than proportional to labor embodied due to differential profit rates will tend towards proportionality as profit rates converge around the natural rate. This point is crucial for the extension of Ricardo's labor embodied theory into class society. Even if the tools and materials necessary for production to take place might, to quote Ricardo, belong to one class of men, and the labor employed might be furnished by another class, it's still the case that their comparative prices would be in proportion to the actual labor bestowed. The point Ricardo is making here is as profit rates equalize across sectors over time, the market prices of commodities will also tend to equalize around proportionality to the relative amounts of labor embodied in them. That is, they'll tend towards their natural prices. To put the same point differently, natural prices are those prices towards which all market prices tend as wage rates and profit rates equalize. A key point, which follows from Ricardo's extension of labor embodied theory into class society, is that the ratio of wage income to profit income across the economy as a whole does not have an effect on the relative prices of commodities. The part of a country's revenue paid out to labor relative to that of capital is called the wage share, and its inverse might be called the profit share. Ricardo says that even if the wage share were to rise without any changes in the technical conditions of production, no greater quantity of labor would be required. The result would be a rise in the wage share and a fall in the profit share, but not an increase in the quantity of labor. With no increase in the quantity of labor expended in the production of a commodity, its value cannot increase. Suppose, for example, the socially average price of wages at a given point of time, the market price for labor, if you will, was bid up due to a spurt of optimism amongst investors. Heightened wage costs will weigh heavily on the producers' balance sheets. Businesses will be inclined to pass those costs on to consumers in the form of higher, nominal money prices. Although this can certainly be done by any particular firm, at least in the short period, all firms as a whole will find themselves unable to do so. Since the workers whose wages are bid up are also consumers, a general increase in nominal prices across the board will only increase the cost of wage goods, food, clothing, etc. This will push the cost of labor upward. Business owners can try yet again to pass higher wage costs on to consumers, but if they do this, they'll be met yet again with the same issue. Higher money prices create higher wages, and higher wages can be passed on again as higher prices, hence the infamous inflationary wage price spiral. It's for this reason that an economy-wide bidding up of wage costs does not affect the prices of goods relative to the price of labor. An increase in the market price of labor can only come via an increase in the wage share and, what is the same phenomenon, a decrease in the profit share. This is the meaning behind Ricardo's statement that, quote, there can be no rise in the value of labor without a fall of profits. As such, he concludes that changes in the distribution of income between labor and capital are consistent with the labor embodied theory of value. This is a conclusion that brings the labor embodied theory well past where Adam Smith left it in The Wealth of Nations. Having extended the labor embodied theory into class society, Ricardo doesn't stop there. He also attempts to explain how it is that differences in the durability of capital affect relative prices within his labor embodied theory. That's what we'll discuss in the next episode. If you're a graduate student or a professor studying economics, particularly history of economic thought, and you have some interesting work you'd be willing to share with me, I'd like to speak with you. Please reach out to me by filling out the form linked in the description of this episode. If you're studying economics at the undergraduate or high school level and you're in need of a tutor, I may be able to help you. You can get in contact with me by filling out that same form. If you'd like to see more content like this, where I discuss various topics in the history of economic thought, please consider checking out my YouTube channel. See you in the next episode.